Welcome everybody to Shared Slack Channel's webinar. Very excited to host this amazing group of customer success leaders. So we'll go around and do some intros here in a little bit. You can see everyone's face there. So maybe we can start, Molly, if you can just introduce yourself, and then Kathryn, and then Ryan, and then we'll get into it.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm glad we have the live video. I was just saying, like, my face feels too big in that photo.
Perfect.
You can see I have normal size face here. But yeah, I lead customer success at Mutiny, and I was actually the first person to join Mutiny, and by way of doing that, kind of had a very wide scope role, and really generalist, and serving all of our customers, trying to create a great experience for them. And so I really wanted to get shared connections and really close relationships with customers by using Slack with them, which was something that I had to really fight for internally, because everyone told me, no, it can't be done, it can't scale. And I was like, yes, it can, and I will show you. And so we're still in the journey of figuring that out, but yeah, excited to chat with you guys today.
Cool. Thanks for being here. Kathryn, a little intro.
Yeah, definitely. Hi, everyone. I'm Kathryn. I lead customer success at a company called Embrace. We're a mobile observability tool. And I have I wouldn't say an opposite experience as Molly, but when I joined Embrace, Slack was very much a part of our relationship with customers. We have Slack channels with every single customer, regardless of size or scope. And when I joined, I was pretty terrified of how that was going to scale. But I quickly became a fan. I realized all of the positives of being able to connect with our customers through Slack really outweighed some of the fear that I had about scalability. So yeah, very excited to chat about our journey with Slack and how things have changed over the years. And also excited to see some old coworkers. Hi, Victor, as a part of the attendees.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Ryan, tell us who you are and tell us the story about those mugs behind you.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Ryan Seams. I head up the customer success team at Mixpanel. We're a product analytics tool. I've been at Mixpanel for 8 years, and I've been in support, customer success, professional services, sales, and our journey with Slack is quite funny. It'll date how long I've been there. We actually started with HipChat back in the day, and a giant HipChat channel where our support team would help get customers answers via live chat. And over the years, we've kind of evolved to move into Slack, obviously, first and foremost. But beyond that, yeah, starting to use Slack, especially in our CSM covered accounts, to have kind of a one-to-one relationship with our accounts, and also make sure that we stay on top of all of our engagements. And then, yeah, you mentioned the mugs. I collected 98 mugs traveling the world that are behind me. It's a real background, and they're all from the same Starbucks series. So there you go.
Incredible. Some of us thought it was a fake image at first. All right, I'm going to stop sharing the screen so we can see all of our faces. So Molly, would love to start with you, learn a little bit more about your journey, because I think we have 3 different journeys with Slack and using Slack with customers. And so you were very early, right from the beginning at Mutiny, CEO was against Slack, and you had a few customers and they were worried about scalability. Tell us about that journey for you, what potential you saw in Slack, and then kind of like how you push that forward.
Yeah, and I joined Mutiny when we were just starting out too. So we had few enough customers that it wasn't a problem, right? We could definitely open up these channels, but I think thinking forward to, as we start to add a lot more customers, how does this scale for us? Are we gonna like dig a grave for ourselves, basically? I think that was sort of the fear, and I was like, let me take on the risk and let me try it out, and I'll show you if it can work. And I'm good with Slack. Like, I've got a lot of systems of, just like the default systems of like hide the things you don't need, like organize your systems in this way, mark stuff on red, like good systems for following up and making sure that you come back to things. And it was working really effectively. But I think the biggest the biggest deciding factor for the team was when we started to see the benefit of it as an org. And so by having shared Slack channels with our customers, we have just such a much closer relationship with our customers, both within kind of customer success and the people that manage the customers, but also org wide. So it enables our whole company to feel closer to our customers, to get more customer insights. We have a company value of live in the world you want to change. And so being able to jump into the customer channels and be able to hear what they talk about and hear the questions that they ask and see what they're saying has been a huge differentiator for us. And so we'll have product managers jumping in and say, hey, could you give me some feedback on that, share a Figma file with them. And so we're able to like bring everybody a lot closer together by doing this. I think that the real catalyst for making this change for us was we actually built a Slack integration with our product. So our product was spitting out Slack alerts to the company, and Mutiny is an experimentation platform. And so in a lot of cases, we have like a marketer who is running experiments on the on their site. And we wanted to help facilitate them sharing the results that they're seeing, showing which companies are coming to their site, and helping them kind of communicate that story. And so we built alerting in Slack to spit out kind of how things are performing. And then we wanted to see, like, how are they responding to this? Are they clicking the buttons? Are they inviting other people into the channel? Are they communicating with each other? And so with our early customers that were betaing this feature, we asked them share the channel with us so that we can kind of engage with you and see that feedback. And then that just kind of became the muscle for us for new customers. We're like, yeah, set up the Slack integration, share it with us, and we can all kind of stay on the same page, cheer you on, celebrate your wins together.
I think there's a lot of interesting things in there. First of all, it was not just CS that got closer with the customers, but also other departments. You mentioned PMs being able to ask feedback. I've seen it with at Branch, where we have about 300 shared channels with customers. I see AEs interacting quite a bit. And I've now started to see even marketing and product marketing start to engage a little bit. What other teams have you seen engage with customers beyond CS and PMs? Anyone else, and any other benefits that you've seen there?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I can think of a team that isn't doing that, but I actually think like org wide, everyone in the company is engaging with customers directly. So we now have, in some cases, AEs open up Slack channels for deals. So they'll do it before the customer closes, hand it off to CS for kind of management once they become a customer with us. And then if the customer is running into problems, we'll sometimes like tag in engineers that worked on the feature, we'll tag in support to help with them. So we'll have kind of that side of the house. Designers want feedback on things that they're planning, or to do kind of customer research sessions or things like that. So they'll jump in. And a lot of times that's kind of orchestrated by our CS team. So they'll say, hey, looking for somebody to give feedback on XYZ, and that, our CS team can flag, oh, this would be a good customer for that. Let me introduce you, tag them in, and kind of get that conversation rolling. And then even like our CEO will jump in sometimes, and when we're fundraising, be like, hey, would you be a reference, or can I connect you with this person, or how's everything going? Or just jump in to cheer them on and say, like, you're doing an awesome job. It means a lot to our customers when our co-founder can jump in and like recognize them for the work that they're doing.
Yeah, that's huge. The CEO who was originally against having Slack for customer channels now is getting the benefit, seeing the benefit of having direct access to a lot of people at these customers. That's so funny. So what advice would you have? So you had a situation where CEO wasn't really excited about it. You were excited, you saw the power of it. What advice would you have for somebody that's in a similar situation? Because I see a lot of people love-hate relationship with Slack for customer channels, or maybe they believe it, but they have to get their team on board. What advice would you have for somebody that's in that situation to help show them the value of Slack channels with customers?
Yeah, I mean, I think, sharing anecdotes like this, where it's like, this has become an org-wide benefit for us, where everybody gets to be closer to the customer. We have these tighter feedback loops with customer feedback and the products that we're building, and making sure we're building it the right people, humanizing our customers, making sure that like we're actually building this for someone, I think goes a really long way. But I think a lot of the fear is mitigated in the world that we live in now, where so many people are building tooling on top of Slack to be able to manage the channels that you're running, where a lot of the fears before were like, it's going to be so noisy, it's going to be so many channels, it's too hard to manage. Like there is, you know, now starting to come about like solutions for these problems where people can actually manage their channels really effectively, and you can automate away kind of the problems that you were scared of in the past. But in general, I think piloting things with 1 or 2 reps that like to do something kind of creative and be groundbreakers and do something different and build the playbook for the rest of the team and show how it can work is a good approach to kind of say like, these people did that, we saw these benefits and within their accounts, versus these people are not doing that and their accounts look like this.
I think that's spot on. I love that. And I love the piloting aspect to it. And we saw that too at branch testing it with a few folks, but the benefits have been massive for us. So Kathryn, I want to pivot over you because you had kind of the inverse experience at Embrace, where I think this, if I recall correctly, the CEO was really excited about this. I think you joined when there were already a bunch of channels.
Yep.
And you had some hesitation at first around it. Tell us about that experience at Embrace.
Yeah, definitely. So I had used Slack with customers in the past, but it was always a paid service. So it was pretty limited in terms of what customers had access through Slack. And so when I joined Embrace, you're exactly right. The CEO, we actually didn't have any other sort of ticketing system. You know, we had Salesforce as a CRM, but really everything was in Slack. So it was a bit overwhelming when I joined to be added to, you know, hundreds and hundreds of Slack channels and try to keep it all straight. Yeah, I think it stemmed from his experience in B2C and working with vendors, where he felt a lot of frustration when he had problems. He would reach out over email or submit a ticket and not hear back for weeks. And he felt like no one really cared about the problems that they were experiencing. So the other big thing too is that our end customers are developers who, you know, they tend to love communicating through Slack, getting on the phone a bit less. And I've learned over my time that a lot of them don't even check email anymore. So the best way to get in touch with them is through Slack. But at first, as you said, I was a little bit hesitant. I think when I joined, we had about 60 to 70 external Slack channels. Some were in you know, mobile development community we had created prior to there being actual shared Slack channels with companies. And then as shared Slack channels came out, we were able to have shared Slack channels within our own instance as well. So it was also kind of segmented between the two workspaces as well. And so it's just a bit overwhelming. And then there was the aspect of, okay, the customer success manager is the main person owning the Slack channel and the communication with the customer. But we didn't really have a good process around that. So really the process was that I was in every single channel and I was the one watching, making sure that people were responding to customers. When, you know, a CSM went out on vacation, I would be the one covering for them because there was no other people in the channel. Since then, you know, we've added a support team, we've grown a bit, we have more processes around that, but it just felt very, a little scary and hard to manage. But, you know, as Molly mentioned, it was pretty quick that I saw the benefits though, and I became a fan. So then my whole mission was, okay, how do we make this scalable? How do we add processes in place so that we can make this successful and it can scale as we grow and add customers? So now we have around 150 Slack channels for customers. All of our salespeople also have external channels for the trials and POCs. And as Molly mentioned, adding tooling around it so that we can make it so, you know, I don't have to be the one overseeing all 150 channels as well.
And so what are the processes and constraints that you put in order to enable that? And are you in all 150 channels?
I am still, yes. But we've also added now our support teams in there, and we have a whole process around, you know, when the CSM is going to be out, they need to notify the support team, letting them know, hey, watch over my channels. We, of course, recently implemented Athena, which we're just getting into, and that's starting to help out a lot. The other thing too is we actually have an internal channel for every customer and then an external channel, which also helps us kind of organize around the discussions that we're having with customers as well. One of the big benefits that I immediately saw was we actually do a lot of our product announcements through Slack. So one of our internal team members built a script. So we call them our product Slack blasts, which we send like every other week, which I think is great because people actually read them, they react to them, they get excited about the features we're releasing, and that sort of thing. So processes are still being built. And then we've also implemented a threshold for getting a Slack channel. So you have to be a certain size customer to get a private Slack channel, but then any customer can join our Slack community in the kind of general open channels.
Are you able to share what that threshold is? And if not, that's okay.
Yeah. So it's 15,000 ARR right now. So it's still relatively small. But we just, when I joined, we had at the time some free customers still that were getting Slack channels, and I was like, oh, this is going to be difficult. So, but yeah, it actually was a pretty simple transition to just moving people to the community as well.
Okay, cool. I do want to come back to the community part, and Garrett, I see your channel or see your question in the Q&A about community. We'll come back to that because I think there's some really interesting things. So as you scaled the 150 channels, you've put constraints in, you've implemented tools like Athena, you have internal channels. Tell us about that, because we do the same thing at Branch, but some companies don't have an internal channel matching to each external channel that they have. Tell us the thought process there and the benefits that you see from doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it actually starts with the salesperson. So when sales is going through a trial, we have like numbering, pre-sales actually allowing you to have sections within Slack, but numbering for onboarding. So we call it onboard when a customer or a prospect is going through the trial. And then when a prospect becomes a customer, we switch it over to a little cheesy hugs. We're Embrace, we like to hug a developer, so it's the hugs channel for all current internal customers. And then, so we have all of the history from the sales process in the Slack channel. The CSM has access to all of that. We use the description to say who's the salesperson on the account, who's the CSM on the account. And then we can also link to Salesforce, to any documentation that we have to try to keep it super organized. And so we do a lot of our handoff work within Slack. I think, again, when new people join and they aren't used to that and they're used to getting all of their details in Salesforce, it can be a little bit of an adjustment, learning how to best navigate Slack and search for things. But I think once you pick it up, it actually is great to have, the place that you're working in throughout the day is going to be the place where you're able to search for all the information that you need as well.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that as well. Kind of the place where you are, rather than having to go to a separate system, especially if, you're a CSM and you're not too comfortable with Salesforce, having to navigate around that versus getting everything right where you are. Okay. I do want to come back to some of the stuff around communities, around implementations and onboarding. We'll come back to that. But Ryan, first with I would love to learn a little bit more about Mixpanel's journey, which is also a little bit different. But first, can you tell people what HipChat is? Because there may be some people that, 8 years ago, maybe never used HipChat.
Yeah, it's funny. Back in the day, HipChat and Slack were like Uber and Lyft. They were full on rumble to see who would be the best chat platform out there. And I vividly remember one feature I really disliked about HipChat, which was when your computer was not open and not connected to the internet, they would send you an email notification of every message that came in. And that has always stuck with me as like the wrong way to notify your customers via email. And I never forget that.
Yep, it is it was part of Atlassian, and then they eventually shut it down a few years later.
Very similar to Slack in the UI and interface, but they did have the better emojis at the time. Slack took those from HipChat, that's for sure.
Yeah. We started with HipChat and then eventually converted over. I think one day when HipChat was down, we just switched over to Slack and never looked back. So tell us about your experience in Mixpanel, you've been there a while. You started off with email. Mixpanel's been around a while. And then obviously that's kind of a lot of inertia around email. There's kind of this fear of the unknown that we were talking about with Slack. Tell us about your journey getting Slack rolled out with customers.
Yeah, I think so. We've always had a live chat option with our support team in addition to email. So Zendesk kind of facilitates both of those options. And I think, historically, we've always seen like live chat's great when people want a quick snap answer and just want to move on with their day. If they have to send an email right and do that, they're not in the moment trying to get the answer, doing the thing that they want to do with the product. And you kind of miss that key moment in that customer, that user's journey to get them the answer they need to unblock them, get them to further value, et cetera. And I think for us, as we kind of pivoted towards Slack, and removed HipChat, got Slack, and Slack itself started to scale. We just saw that in the cases where we actually opened up a Slack channel where customers were kind of demanding it, right, as part of the process to close a deal. Ultimately, those customers were more engaged. We were closer to them. We had a stronger relationship, and then we also got a lot of the benefits that have been described throughout the rest of this call, which is we could bring in anyone from our team. We can attach all of our resources in one place. Someone leaves the company, you have all the context of what's actually been going on with the customer. And ultimately, in many ways, like that shared Slack channel functions as almost like a texting basis relationship with your customer. And if you can get to that point with your customer, right, you can get a lot more done than if you're behind the walls of email or call trying to build that relationship. And so for us, we've got about 150 Slack Connect channels now. We don't have software managing it. Similar to what Molly said, we kind of have had some experimenters who really wanted to dive in Slack and make it kind of the only thing and the only place that they check. They haven't succeeded fully yet, but they have proven that it's super valuable. And I think we had a question earlier, which was kind of like, how would you go about rolling this out? I think one of the other things to do, guys, once those people experiment, bring the hard data to your CEO, to your chief customer officer, whoever it happens to be, because at least for us, when we go look at the data of customers who have an open Slack Connect channel versus customers who have no Slack, we're looking at astounding gains in key metrics like net retention, account health, et cetera, that you can clearly see plain as day. And so we do the one-to-one management in our own Slack Connect with our CSMs. And then we also have a Slack community that we launched earlier in 2022. That's at about 5,000 people now. I think the hope there, right, is, especially if you have a free plan or a lower priced plan, we can't really have you with a CSM one-to-one in a Slack Connect channel. But if we can replicate that experience, right, in a community, whether that's some other user replying to you, someone on our support team replying to you, et cetera, we can get close to that same experience and do it at scale with many, many users and customers, not just the ones who happen to pay a lot and get access to one-to-one Slack.
I love that. I love that. And so you've cut it off at enterprise. Enterprise, you can get a channel. Below that, maybe go to the community. Can you share kind of like the rough number or ACV number around which you'll allow people to have a Slack shared channel? And follow-up question, do you charge more for a shared channel, such as having like premium support or access to that channel?
Yeah, it's a great question. For us right now, we typically start at $50K for access to the Slack channel, at least that one-to-one interaction. Part of the reason behind that is we don't have tooling today to manage those channels scaling. And so if we don't have a higher threshold, the number of customers will grow quickly and we won't be able to manage it. And so tools like Theta are things that we're looking into to say, hey, if we've proven this works, why 50K? Can't we bring it down to, whatever the enterprise plan minimum happens to be? And I think as you look towards like just even buying behavior, like, customers, when they pay nothing, the expectations are different. When they buy online and they never talk to anyone and they don't have a contract, they can cancel anytime, expectations are different. And when you have a contract, your expectations are the highest, right? And so that's why we kind of focused there and started with our enterprise plan customers. But as we've scaled to those other plan types and created the Slack community, we've started to see that it's not crazy to try to replicate a very similar experience, leveraging the power of community to help you with those answers.
Yeah, I love that. And you talked about kind of the hard data and bringing hard data, and you shared that net retention much higher, CSAT higher. We saw the same thing at Branch when I did a study. The net retention for those customers that had a shared Slack channel was something like, call it 125, or making numbers up, 125 versus 105. It was like a vast difference. Tell us about why you think that is, and any other insights that you can share there.
I think in some ways I will be clear, like there's a selection bias, right? Like the customer has to accept your Slack channel to get into it and start chatting with you. And in my experience, at least when I receive Slack channel invites that I don't actually accept, typically means I'm maybe not the most engaged prospect, or I'm not the best champion, et cetera. And so I will say there's a selection bias of like the people accepting the invite are the people who are like interested in going to engage with you. But I think ultimately what you see, right, is like, that's where they work. That's where they want to connect. That's where they want to communicate. And if you meet the customer where they are, you're going to see vastly superior results than trying to force some sort of communication medium or style onto a customer that frankly doesn't communicate that way. And I think Kathryn brought it up earlier, but like our core audience is engineers, product managers, designers. These are all folks who work at organizations where they're like world-class and they have software engineering processes and things that they all follow, and they have their own rituals and culture, and trying to come in and be like, hey, let's hop on a Zoom call when they're like, we don't do Zoom calls. You're just immediately alienating yourself to what those customers want and how they want to communicate. If you're like, hey, let's meet in Slack, and make it even bigger, like, hey, it might be MS Teams, it could be Discord, it might be WhatsApp, depending on where you are in the world, like figure out where the customer wants to communicate, and ultimately that'll drive superior results. And for us, that's Slack most of the time. But depending on your customer, it could be somewhere different.
Cool. Yeah. And Kathryn, I think you said earlier that you had this experience where some people don't even reply to emails these days. Would love to open it up. Are other people seeing something similar? I definitely see that. I've had some customers say, don't email me, Slack me or text me and I'll respond. But if you send me an email, I'm not going to respond. I'm curious what other people have seen, because I'm curious where email goes from here. So let's open it up to the broader group, whoever wants to go.
I definitely saw that too before we decided to open up Slack channels with everyone. We had some customers that said, we don't use email. All of our work is in Slack. So I'm never going to see anything you email, which definitely helped with making the case like, for this customer, we obviously need this solution. Like, this is the way to engage with them. This is the way to connect with them.
Yeah, I think some of our best anecdotes are cases where, some customers gotten emails for months and months and they like reply once or never reply. You send them a separate email that's just like, hey, do you want to open a Slack channel? And they're like, that would be great. I can't wait. And you're like, wow, that was the one thing that got them to reply. None of the other things for 6 months. And that's just the reality of what customers want.
And Kathryn, similar for you? That's been your experience?
Yes, definitely. And I think part of it stems from the sales process, and that, when they're integrating our SDKs, they're working hand in hand with the sales engineer and the account executive. They get that kind of one-on-one experience to get set up for success. So then the expectation moving forward would be to continue to get that that sort of support from our team. So I think from my perspective, it is only good that starting off in the sales process, they're very engaged, they're, have some sort of excitement about trying the product. And so it continues throughout the customer journey that, through Slack is the main place that they're going to connect with us. And yes, I have several cases where, the people on my team are like, I've emailed the VP or the CTO several times. I'm like, have you tried DMing them over Slack? They're like, oh, I'll try that. And then, instantly we get a response, because people feel, it goes both ways, but people feel a need to respond over Slack, whereas email, I feel like there's a little bit of a barrier from having to respond. But then the same thing goes for when customers reach out to us over Slack. You have to make sure that expectations are set in terms of response times. And obviously, we want to respond as quickly as possible all of the time. But if you think about, even a CSM's schedule, they're on customer calls all day. They can't be just staring, looking at Slack all the time. So I think that's another important thing, to make sure you set expectations with your customers for when to use Slack, when to submit tickets with our support team, and how quickly they should always expect to hear back from us as well.
Let's dive into that a little bit, because it's something I hear quite often. How do you, Kathryn, and then I would love to hear from Ryan and Molly, how you do it. How do you set expectations with customers? In what format do you communicate it? Do you re-communicate it over time? Tell me about that.
Yeah, that's a great question, and definitely something we're still navigating. I kind of leave it up to each CSM in terms of how they want to manage their book of business and what Slack channels they own. I just always encourage them to communicate what works well for them and understand what works best for the customer. So different CSMs will do things differently. Sometimes on the kickoff call we have, when we're onboarding a new customer, we'll have a welcome one pager we send the customer. We have the kickoff deck, and there'll be some information around, what is Slack best used for? What is our, ticketing system best used for? What are the expectations around response times? But at the end of the day, I leave it up to the CSM to set expectations with their customers. And I think for the most part, customers are super understanding. And if anything, they're always amazed by how quickly we do get back to them through Slack compared to, email or ticketing systems.
Cool. Ryan, Molly, how do you guys communicate to customers about expectations and set those constraints?
We're in an interesting place right now. We've taken a little bit of a non-traditional SaaS journey where we are just starting to build our first support team right now. And so we've actually had a team of generalist CX people handling everything post-sales with the customer, onboarding, implementation, success, support, renewals, and expansion, all within kind of one person. So the customer has their person, and that's their person for everything, is kind of the expectation that our customers have today. So within a Slack channel, it's, everything goes, like questions about strategy, questions about how to get your account set up, strategic support questions, billing questions, all of that kind of funnels through one person today. And so this is something that we need to now introduce, now that we are building a support function and team, to kind of reset expectations with our customers and say, here's what I'm here for. Here's maybe a faster channel for you to open a ticket directly versus waiting for me to get off my calls and get back to you. So those are some of the playbooks that we're actively building right now.
I love it. And Ryan, what about you at Mixpanel?
Yeah, I think posting the expectations in the room when you start the channel is the best thing to do. You can pin that message. In addition, you can use all Slack's great features to add that to the top as one of the quick links, etc. I do think generally though, you are kind of at the whatever the customer's expectations of response times on Slack are, which are generally quite fast. And I think it's funny, a lot of times people say, oh, what's your SLA for response time? When will you get back to me, etc., etc. And if you just say, yeah, we're going to open a Slack channel, that whole conversation just goes away. People are like, I don't care about what an SLA is in Slack. I know you're in Slack. I know you're reachable. I know someone will be available to help contact me. And so I think that expectation, while you can set it, ultimately it's similar to whatever your own company's expectations are around using Slack, which is it's casual, it's quick, but you probably only have X number of hours to reply before someone pings you again and starts tagging you and asking follow-up questions.
Something we've seen for sure. I've seen some CSMs do exactly what you're talking about. They'll put it in the description and then periodically repost into the channel for anyone that's new in the channel. And I've found that to be quite effective. But at the end of the day, if somebody has a question and they're not thinking about it, or if a new person gets tagged in and added to the channel in order to ask their question, they may not know. So I think as visible as you can make it, either linking to some sort of description or even an external doc we have in some channels, that can be really effective. One of the things I heard a couple times too was this concept of Slack channels being made during the implementation or onboarding process. And it's been interesting to see, because we've seen this as well at Branch, where it originally started with customers, and then it started getting earlier, where as soon as we sign a contract, or even before we sign a contract, maybe even during a trial or a POC, we'd open up a Slack channel, and that helped with the implementation, speed up the implementation, especially with developers. I'm curious what you three have seen if you're using channels in that earlier stage funnel, and any benefits or challenges that you see with that.
I can go first. Yes, so as I mentioned, it is kind of table stakes that our AEs and sales engineers will create a shared channel during the trial phase. And I think it helps immensely. So anytime that a customer runs into any sort of issues integrating our SDK, they're able to troubleshoot and help them so much faster. And to be honest, I was, I guess, pleasantly surprised. I always, thought that when a customer runs into any issues, especially when they're trialing something, they're just going to be like, oh, this doesn't work. I'm not going to use this solution. But I think because of Slack and the support that they get from our teams throughout the integration process and the quick responses, and oh, let's just hop on a quick call, let's do a huddle to help you out. It helps immensely, and I think has allowed us to speed up the integration process, help people navigate any challenges that they run into, and ultimately makes them feel so much more taken care of and confident that our team is going to be there for them if they become a customer. So I think it's great. There's a lot to take care of and navigate. And even when I pop into the sales channels, there's probably infinitely more questions that come through during the integration process when people are trialing. So I definitely give it up to the AE and SE teams, because it's definitely, a lot to keep up with and make sure people are seeing value quickly as well.
Molly, Ryan, any insights or learnings that you've had with the implementation or onboarding phase?
Yeah, onboarding, I think just, we usually set, if it hasn't already been set up with sales in advance, we'll set it up usually after kind of the first introduction meeting with the CSM on our side. So you've already sort of like had a face-to-face connection at that point, and it's just like, hey, I'm here for you. I'm part of your team. We're working in the same workspace. I'm here to help. And for us, like our first, our value mechanism is launching experiments on our platform. And so our goals are to get the customer to launch as quickly as possible and get them to launch as many experiences as possible. And so our team is constantly first pushing them to launch, because I think people have a tendency to be slow and get scared and think things are hard when they're not actually hard. And so our team is here to make it all feel really easy for them in a lot of different ways. So, first is pushing them a little bit. I think that pushes go, nudges maybe on Slack is a better term for it, but they're felt, I think, in a softer way when it comes to on Slack, hey, are you coming across any blockers? What can we do to help? It just feels very friendly and helpful, versus I think on email can feel a little bit more I don't know, attacked to customers perhaps in some ways. But then definitely to overcome the fear and the anxiety that can surround something that you're doing first time, it's helpful to say I'm here for you. Ping me if you have any questions as you're getting stuff set up. And so a lot of times our customers will say set this up, I'm not quite sure, can you check? And so the team's kind of there as checks and balances for them too, which can be really helpful. We had an email cadence for new customers that kind of took them through setup and launching and what should they do. And we're really excited to build this flow into Slack in an automated way, where customer starts, we integrate the channel, and then we have kind of week after week do this week, do this week, like one thing, kind of drip sequences that we can run and automate, but have that come from the growth strategist, like it's a one-on-one DM even for them.
Love that. Love that. I think some good insights. And then Ryan, do you guys use Slack during that implementation onboarding phase?
Yeah, we do. It's inconsistent in the sales process, but definitely when we open up the Slack channel, I mean, ultimately, right, like your goal is time to value in some way, shape, or form, whatever that value metric is for you in onboarding. And to us, Slack just gets rid of these like useless cycles of back and forth emails and trying to schedule the call to unblock the thing, yada, yada. It's just very like casual, carefree. Let's get the help you need. Let's unblock you. Let's move forward. And when we use Slack versus not, I mean, your implementation process, you know, goes from months to weeks essentially.
We'd seen something very similar. And one of the things I noticed was when somebody would email, if a developer was implementing an SDK or an API and they ran into an issue and they asked a question and they sent it over email, and then it would be 4 hours till somebody saw it and then maybe respond end of day, the next day, you lost that moment when they were already in the code. And as soon as they moved on to do something else, it might take a week or two before they get back to getting into that code. So you can respond, 8 hours later and they may not be able to work on it for another week. With Slack, what we saw is if we thought it was urgent, we'd be able to respond right away. And we had a lot more people visible versus when it was email, it might have been sent to one person. When it was in a channel, we might have had 20 people in that channel. And then somebody could say, oh, I know, Ryan is busy right now. I'm going to go tag somebody else, Noel, so he can get that person an answer because I know that they're working on it right now. And that sped up our implementations quite a bit, similar to you, Ryan. And I think that a key piece of that was faster response times, part of it driven by the fact that we had more eyes on the questions that were coming in. So we'd be able to get real-time responses to the developers while they were actually working on the implementation. And I thought that was pretty interesting.
It's funny because you mentioned that, it works really well one-on-one when you have a CSM covered account and everybody in your company, but the same concept applies in a Slack community. It's just with a bunch of other users instead of your colleagues.
Cool. I think that's a great segue. Let's shift over, talk about communities for a bit, and then would love to hear in a few minutes your guys' thought on where the world goes in the next 5 or 10 years. So on the community side, this is something that I'm starting to see a little bit more. Garrett asked the question in the Q&A. I've chatted with some other people recently, and they're either thinking about launching communities or have recently launched communities. Would love to hear from each of you, kind of if you use a community, and if so, the benefits you've seen. Ryan, maybe we can start with you because we were talking about your community the other day and you've seen massive growth. So maybe we can start there.
Sure, yeah. So basically, if we rewind a year, we had a forum style community similar to like a help docs where people would make a post and other people would comment on that. And I think ultimately that type of community is really nice for like Google search indexing and like functioning as documentation. But what it really loses, right, is that like back and forth communication that's very like personal and specific to the customer and their needs. And so we made the decision, given that our customers love to communicate in Slack, it's their preferred mode of communication, to launch a Slack community. So we've grown to, like over 5,000 users over the course of the year. It's definitely been a ride. I think, some of the things that we've learned right away is like, not everyone comes to the community to like be a community champion and stay for forever. And so you'll probably see things like, 1 month retention are not the best in your Slack community because a lot of people just want to come. It's transactional. I get my answer and then I move on, right? And that's okay. And you want to make sure those people have a great experience. To what we talked about earlier, right? They're in the moment, they have a question, they need it answered. And so you need to be sure that your team is staffed to help answer those questions if the other users are not. But ultimately, there's kind of segmenting your users is really important. Like who's going to be casual, who might become one of your champions, who might become an advocate, and figuring out how to activate them, right, to answer the questions of the other folks in the community. And then, beyond that, like setting the same thing, expectations and guidelines for your community is really, really important. We have our own that we have on our website, but I think, we actually follow DBT for a lot of our community inspiration. They're one of the best Slack communities out there that we take a lot of inspiration from because they're very similar product space, similar type of persona that they're catering to. And they've got like, geez, 20,000 plus users now. It's quite impressive. But yeah, generally speaking, how do you scale that one-to-one experience that's super awesome and gets you an answer very quickly in the moment to many people? The community can help facilitate that as long as you have it staffed correctly and you set the right expectations with your customers.
And with staffing, two questions, do you staff it with a full-time resource that is solely in charge of that, or do you have just people kind of chiming in? And then second, is the primary expectation that customers help each other out first, or that somebody from Mixpanel replies?
Yeah, it's I guess I'll answer in order. So I think for number one, we have one community manager where it's her full-time job to manage the community and everything going on, but she's not answering all of the questions because there's tons and tons of them. And so we actually have, as a portion of other people's roles, hey, go take whatever X number of hours out of your day to check the community, reply to the threads, etc. Similar to what a CSM would do one-to-one in a channel, except it's one giant channel with lots of different customers. And then I think to your second question there, which sorry, what was it again?
Do customers, or is the expectation that customers help each other out?
I was gonna say, it's a really fine line because you want customers to help each other, but you also don't want the customer to wait so long that they lose that moment where they're trying to whatever, edit the code, build a report, etc. And so typically what we do from that perspective is monitor some sort of response time metric, whether that's 4 hours, 8 hours, 24 hours, probably depends on, the type of question. You try to have the community answer it themselves. And if not, that's where you want your team to actually go jump in and answer that question themselves.
Cool. Love it. Kathryn, I'd love to hear if you guys have a community and what that experience is like. And then Molly, over to you after that.
Yeah, so ours is a little bit different. It was actually what we initially created before I joined the company, but and before shared Slack channels were a thing, we created what's called our mobile development community in a workspace. And essentially it was people can actually get to it and sign up directly from our product. So there's a link within our product to join the Slack community. And that is also where we started having private channels with customers. So it's a little bit of a mix, but we have we call it like all things tech channel and then our general channel. So if you're a customer that doesn't have the private or shared Slack channel, you can go there and ask questions. I would say because we don't have a dedicated member of the team managing the community, it's a little bit quiet. So actually, I'm kind of set up to get notifications every time someone new joins the workspace. So I send them a message, just like a copy paste, welcoming them to the community, asking if, they have, if they know if their company has a shared Slack channel, and then just saying like, it's a bit quiet here. So a lot of people have their own private channels, but let me know if there's anything I can do to help. I think one of the goals this year is to make it a little bit more lively, because I think since everyone has their own private channels, the open channels are just kind of dead, or every once in a while someone joins and gives a wave or asks a question. And then we find out what company they're at, add them to a private channel if they have one. So I would say we have one, but it's probably a little quieter than the one at Mixpanel.
Love it. And then Molly, what about you guys at Mutiny?
We have a community that is more like a thought leadership community. And so we kind of explicitly and intentionally don't try to overly market Mutiny in that channel, which is really interesting. So we have a lot of customers in there, but we have a lot of non-customers in there as well. And it's basically meant to be like a marketers on a CMO track career trajectory. So we have some CMOs in there too for mentorship, but then also a lot of kind of high achieving marketers that are like, they want advice and feedback. And we'll run, we do have a dedicated community manager who runs the community. She puts in prompts all the time and keeps it really lively and active. But it is a great place for people like asking best practices. She'll run events that are like panels for our customers to kind of speak on. And so there is a lot of like subtle marketing, I guess, for the product, where people are talking about the experiments that they're running and the ABM programs that they're building, And there's like, our customers are kind of mixed and embedded within there, but we haven't yet actually even created a Mutiny channel within our community where customers can talk to each other, which was intentional for fueling growth. But I think I'd be interested in trying and seeing how that lands for kind of scaling support. When I reading the question that was like anything that worked or didn't work, I do have a didn't work that I can share, which was before we launched a community, I tried matchmaking between customers. So I'd take two customers who like, oh, you kind of have a similar business model and you do similar use cases and you have similar audiences. You should learn from each other. You're both doing amazing things, and built a me, you, them channel for all of us shared. They did not talk to each other at all.
Was that because they're too competitive or some other reason?
I think it needed somebody fueling it that was like, hey, you just did this cool thing. Why don't you share it? Either that or they wanted to speak freely and I was sitting in there. I don't know which one.
You just need to create the channel and then you leave.
Yeah. Okay. Bye. You guys, but then I don't know if it works.
Yeah.
I think it did hear that they met up with each other and had some conversation. So maybe they took the connection and went to DM or something like that.
That's cool. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm keeping an eye on time. I do want to get to where the world is going. Sumesh, I see your question. Maybe in the interest of time, I can summarize some of the things that I've seen or heard from this group, but also from others. We've got a few questions in here. Struggling with noise in kind of internal and external channels. I think that's a big common thing. You talked about how to scale this multiple teams and you separate out internal channels. What we do at Branch, and we've got about 300 external customer shared channels. What we do is all those customers also have a matching internal channel. That internal channel will typically have product, maybe eng, maybe product marketing, but the external channel may not. It may have the AE, the CSM, the solutions engineer, the technical account manager, whoever. And so it might be a little bit more limited in the external channel, which helps prevent kind of too many people getting too many things, but the internal channels where we might bring broader discussions where we need other people. And you can route things with like with Athena, like tool, you can have requests that get detected, route to in that internal channel on a per customer basis, which can also help. That's what we found to be, pretty helpful. You also asked about, and I'm rushing through this just in the interest of time. You also asked about kind of integration with CRM and ticketing solutions. Like Molly said earlier, this is where there's products and tools coming on the market, like Athena nowadays, that help with this exactly. But basically, you have maybe all of your issues or tickets or requests from customers inside of Slack, and then you also want to integrate it with your Zendesk, your Freshdesk, your Salesforce, et cetera. And that's where at least the way we have it set up is we'll handle most requests within Slack. They'll get detected within Slack, and then with an emoji button click or with like a right click, create a external ticket, then you can convert that into for us, it's Salesforce. We use Service Cloud, but some people use Zendesk, et cetera. And then that converts it into a ticket, which ends up going to your email ticketing solution. We have an email support team that lives in Service Cloud in Salesforce. And so they never need to come into Slack, but I know I heard a little bit from the teams here. Sometimes you have support people inside of those channels as well. And so there's different models that you can do as well. In terms of like, how do you prevent the noise? I think that kind of like manual one click, like emoji, convert it into a ticket is better than having everything that could be a ticket sending all to places like Zendesk or Slack or Salesforce. So that's something that we found worked. I'll follow up with you. I have your email. I'll follow up with you afterwards in case I can help there as well. Okay, I do want to go to, in the last few minutes, where the world is going in the next 5 or 10 years. And I'd love to hear each of your thoughts, because it's really interesting. And if you backtrack 10 years ago, Slack didn't really exist. HipChat kind of existed, but internal kind of like messaging tools, external messaging tools weren't really all that popular. Everything was on email. Fast forward to where we are today, a lot of that is shifting. The trend is going towards more messaging tools, primarily Slack, a little bit in Teams, some in Discord. As we think about where things are going the next 5 or 10 years, curious what thoughts you guys have, or guesses or bets you have on where B2B communication goes from here.
Sure.
Let
To
you
me,
take it, Ryan.
yeah, sure. To me, Slack is like the next Salesforce. There's very few businesses built on top of it today, and you're going to see a ton of businesses for specific use cases built on top of Slack and the data and monitoring, et cetera, that exist, because businesses use it to communicate between one another, and they're going to need metrics, monetization, et cetera, of all that communication. That also means it'll probably become a giant enterprise, and some other small competitor doing something different could potentially come and eat its lunch. But to this point, I don't know what that might be outside of Discord.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I feel like we're just starting to see tools like Thena. I had been looking for a tool to help manage since I joined Embrace over the last 2 years. So I think we're only going to see the space grow as more and more B2B companies adopt Slack as the number, or whatever other communication tool as the #1 communication tool that they have with their customers. I think what has prevented a lot of companies from fully adopting Slack as their main customer tool is, as what I had originally, was the fear of how to scale that and set expectations. So I think as more tools come on the market to help manage it, it will just become the norm for most companies.
Yeah, and email may be used even less than it is.
Yeah.
Molly, what about your thoughts? Any guesses 10 years from now?
Yeah, I agree with everyone here. Like, I think right now we're in a place where you have a competitive advantage if you're doing things differently, if you're engaging with your customers in a different way. Like, we have a lot of our customers that, you know, they're blown away that we can provide this level of support and relationship with them. And so, you know, moving 5-10 years, we'll move into the like majority of people operating this way. And so, you know, us kind of front of sword, not an expression, bleeding edge kind of people that are like doing things differently at the, you know, the front of the pack and wanting to innovate and give different experiences. We're going to have to up our game and find the next thing that we can move into, because it's you know, exceptional customer experiences are not what you get from everybody else, but it's built on that. It's on top of that and giving people kind of above and beyond service than what you get today. But I think we'll see, like, as it becomes commoditized, there will be a lot of automations around the things that right now are kind of like beautiful personal touches that that people really come to love.
I love that. I love that. I think that's spot on. I think that's a great place to end. Really appreciate your time and your insights, Molly, Kathryn, Ryan. This is wonderful. For all the attendees, we will share out the recording after this in case you want to rewatch any of it, or if you want to share it with other people. So thank you, everybody, for your time, and have a great day.
Thanks so much.
Great chatting with you guys.